Anger. Just the word itself makes most people uneasy. We've been taught to fear it, to silence it, to lock it away. From the time we were kids, the message was clear. Don't shout, don't explode, don't be angry. But here's the paradox. The more we push anger down, the more it takes control from the shadows. What if anger isn't just a problem to fix, but a teacher waiting to be heard? Think about the last time you felt your chest tighten, your breath grow short, your voice rising before you could stop it. Maybe it was in traffic, maybe it was at work, maybe it was with someone you love. That rush of fire wasn't only about the situation in front of you, it was something older, something deeper, something asking for your attention. Carl Jung would say that in those heated moments, the shadow is speaking. Anger isn't random noise. It's a message from your unconscious. It's pointing to the wound you've hidden, the boundary you've ignored, the part of yourself you've disowned. Like a fire alarm, it doesn't exist to burn the house down. It exists to wake you up. The problem is, most of us treat anger like an enemy. We either explode and hurt others, or we implode, swallowing it until it poisons us quietly. Neither path brings growth. Anger only becomes destructive when we refuse to listen. Imagine anger as a torch in the dark. Held carelessly, it burns. Held wisely, it lights the way. Every flare of anger is a signpost. It shows you where your life is out of balance, where something in you is crying to be seen. So instead of asking, how do I get rid of anger? Maybe the better question is, what is anger trying to teach me? Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll see anger not as a curse, but as one of your greatest guides. And the most surprising lesson of all is hidden in the final truth we'll uncover, the one Jung hinted at, but few have the courage to face. We live in a world that tells us to stay positive, think happy thoughts, and let go of negativity. At first it sounds harmless. Who wouldn't want peace? Who wouldn't want to rise above conflict? But here's the hidden cost. When we keep pushing away what feels dark or uncomfortable, we also push away the very emotions designed to protect and guide us. And anger is one of them. Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to face doesn't disappear. It sinks into the unconscious, where it waits and gathers strength. This is where the shadow is born, the parts of us we reject, suppress, or deny. And anger is usually one of the first emotions to be locked inside. Think back to your own childhood. What happened when you raised your voice? Maybe someone told you to calm down. Maybe you were punished. Maybe you were shamed. Slowly, you learned that being angry made you bad. So you hid it, you buried it, just to be accepted. But your anger didn't vanish. It slipped into the shadow. And from there, it began shaping your thoughts, your choices, your relationships in ways you couldn't see. This is why shadow work is so crucial today, because every time we avoid anger, we don't become more peaceful. We become more disconnected from ourselves. Anger that's never examined leaks out sideways. It shows up as sarcasm, as silent resentment, as passive-aggressive words. It shows up in sleepless nights, in stress that wears down the body. But something changes the moment you turn toward anger with curiosity instead of judgment. Suddenly, it isn't the enemy of peace anymore. It's the messenger of truth. It reveals where you've been betrayed, where your boundaries are weak, where your values have been stepped on. Without anger, you'd stay stuck in situations that hurt you, repeating patterns that slowly drain your spirit. Let's bring this down to earth. Picture yourself in a meeting. You share an idea, but your boss takes the credit. Instantly, that fire rises in your chest. The shadow-driven responses are two extremes. Either you explode and risk your job, or you swallow the anger and replay it in your head all night. But if you listen closely, the anger is saying, your voice matters, your work matters, claim your space. Or imagine a relationship where someone keeps crossing your boundaries. You don't speak up, you smile, you stay quiet. But the anger simmers, and when it finally bursts, even you're shocked by its force. Yet the message was there all along. This line is sacred, protect it. Do you see the pattern? Shadow work is not just a spiritual concept, it's a survival skill in modern life. We live under constant pressure. Deadlines, expectations, the endless scroll of social media telling us to smile, perform, and rise above. But under those filters, people are boiling, carrying anger they don't dare to admit. Shadow work gives you permission to say, yes, I feel this. Yes, it matters. And yes, I can learn from it. When anger becomes conscious, something powerful happens. You reclaim your wholeness. You realize that dark emotions aren't here to destroy you, they're here to restore you. Anger doesn't only expose your wounds. It also reveals hidden strength, forgotten courage, and your deep hunger for justice and truth. So, instead of pushing anger away, invite it into awareness. Ask yourself, what boundary does this reveal? What value is being crossed? What power is waiting for me to claim? Jung understood this paradox well. Only by facing the darkness do we find the light. When you bring anger out of the shadow, you don't just transform your relationship with it. You transform your relationship with yourself. Picture yourself standing in front of a volcano. On the surface, it looks calm. The mountain is covered in green. The sky is bright. You'd never guess what's happening underneath. But deep inside, fire is building. Pressure rises, quietly, invisibly. And one day, without warning, it erupts. Lava pours down, ash fills the sky, and the world around it is shaken. Anger works the same way. On the outside, you look composed. You smile. You say, "It's fine, don't worry about it." But inside, heat is gathering. Every time you ignore a boundary, every time you swallow your truth, every time you silence yourself to avoid conflict, the pressure grows. That energy doesn't disappear. It waits, it simmers, until it bursts in ways you never intended. The lesson is clear. Anger denied becomes destructive. Anger acknowledged becomes transformative. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, we'll call her Maya. At work, Maya was known as the peacemaker. Always kind, always willing. The one who said yes when everyone else said no, but behind her smile she carried a quiet storm. Her boss piled extra tasks on her, knowing she wouldn't refuse. Her coworkers leaned on her, rarely returning the favor. Even at home, her patience was taken for granted. For years, Maya held it in. "It's okay," she told herself, "I can handle it." But her body told the truth she wouldn't. Sleepless nights, stomach pains, a constant tightness in her chest. Until one day, in a meeting where her boss dismissed her yet again, something inside her broke. She erupted. Shouting, shaking, a fire she couldn't stop. The room fell silent. She felt terrified and oddly relieved. It wasn't the outburst that changed Maya's life. It was the realization that followed. Anger had been speaking to her all along. Each time her boundaries were crossed, it whispered, "Stand up, protect yourself." She ignored it until her shadow forced its way out. From that day forward, Maya began to listen. She started journaling every flicker of irritation. She asked herself, what is this really about? What boundary is being touched? She practiced in small steps, saying no to an extra task, asking for help at home, voicing her needs before the pressure built too high. Slowly, she discovered that anger wasn't her enemy. It was her compass. This is the essence of shadow work. To see emotions not as intruders, but as guides. Anger is energy raw, powerful energy. Left unconscious, it destroys. Made conscious, it creates. The same fire that burns can also forge steel, cook food, bring warmth, and light the way. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, where is the volcano inside you? Where are you holding back fire, telling yourself it's no big deal? And what might happen if, instead of waiting for eruption, you chose to listen now? Because anger is not just rage, it is power, it is life force. It is a voice demanding to be heard. The real question is not whether you feel it, because you do. The real question is whether you'll let it rule you from the shadows, or bring it into the light and let it teach you. Every eruption has a lesson. And once you learn to read those lessons, you stop fearing your anger. You start transforming it. Anger becomes most dangerous, not when it's felt, but when it hides. Buried in the shadow, it slips into your life in ways you don't notice, shaping your reactions, your choices, and even your relationships. Let's look at 3 of the clearest signs that anger is steering from the dark. Explosive outbursts over small things. Have you ever snapped over something tiny, someone cutting you off in traffic, a partner forgetting to take out the trash, and wondered why your reaction was so intense? That anger wasn't really about traffic or chores. It was the shadow, seizing a chance to release pressure. When anger is buried, it doesn't die. It waits. Then it hijacks safe moments and bursts through. The outburst brings momentary relief, but afterward you're left with guilt, shame, and confusion. Deep down, your psyche is saying, "I've held too much for too long." The next time you explode, pause and ask, what part of my life feels ignored or disrespected right now? What deeper frustration is this anger pointing to? The fire you see is the symptom. The shadow beneath is the source. Silent resentment that weighs you down. On the other side is silence. Instead of exploding, you implode. You nod, you smile, you say, "It's fine." But inside, the fire burns hotter. Silent resentment is like a backpack filled with stones. Each time you stay quiet, another stone is added. Over time, the weight is crushing. It shows up in tense shoulders, headaches, restless nights. Resentment doesn't just poison relationships, it poisons you. The practice here is simple. Notice those small moments when you swallow your truth. Write them down. Even if you don't act right away, awareness begins to lift the weight. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Your silent anger is not fate. It's a voice waiting for you to listen. Projection onto others. Perhaps the most subtle sign is projection, seeing in others what you can't face in yourself. You call someone too aggressive, too demanding, too selfish, without realizing those are qualities you've buried in yourself. Projection is the shadow's favorite trick. It lets you condemn others while avoiding your own reflection. But every time anger rises at someone's behavior, pause and ask, what does this reveal about me? What part of myself am I disowning that I now see in them? Take a simple example. You criticize a coworker for always speaking up, but secretly you envy their courage. Your anger isn't really about them. It's about your own silenced voice begging for expression. These 3 signs, explosive outbursts, silent resentment, and projection, are the shadow's way of whispering, "Look at me, don't ignore me anymore." Anger, when hidden, always leaks through cracks. But when brought into the light, it becomes one of your greatest teachers. When anger is buried, it doesn't just explode or go silent. It weaves itself into habits so familiar you may not even notice them. Let's uncover 3 more signs that your shadow is quietly steering your life. Passive-aggressive behavior. Sometimes anger doesn't shout. It sneaks out sideways, maybe through sarcasm, maybe by forgetting to do something you promised, maybe through compliments that sting more than they soothe. Outwardly, you look calm. Inside, your anger is leaking through the cracks. The problem is, this confuses people. They can feel the tension, but your words don't match. Trust erodes. Connection weakens. The practice? Watch for those moments when your actions don't match your words. Ask yourself, what truth am I afraid to say out loud? What would it take to express it directly, with honesty and respect? Passive aggression is anger's way of pushing you toward courage. Self-sabotage. Shadow anger doesn't always lash out at others. Sometimes it turns against you. You procrastinate. You hold back from opportunities. You neglect your health. On the surface, it looks like laziness. But underneath, it may be unspoken resentment. If no one listens to me, if my needs don't matter, why should I bother? Instead of expressing anger outward, you punish yourself. Try reflecting, when I sabotage myself, what unspoken anger might be hiding underneath. You may find that your avoidance isn't weakness at all, it's anger begging you to set boundaries, speak truth, or stop carrying what was never yours. Chronic irritability. Sometimes anger doesn't explode or sabotage. It lingers. Like a low-grade fever you can't shake. You sigh at small things. Snap at people you love. Roll your eyes at everything. It's not one big eruption, it's a constant hum of dissatisfaction. Chronic irritability is anger's way of saying you're living out of alignment. Something in your life, your job, your relationship, your daily routine is grinding against your true self. The smoke is constant because the fire hasn't been faced. The practice? Track your irritability. Write down when it rises. You'll notice patterns. Maybe it's always at meetings. Maybe always around one person. These patterns are a map pointing you to the parts of your life that need change. Passive aggression, self-sabotage, chronic irritability. These are anger's quiet disguises. The shadow doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. But if you ignore the whispers too long, they always turn into storms. Some signs of shadow anger are easy to spot: a sharp outburst, a sarcastic jab, a constant irritation. But the most dangerous forms are the ones you don't even recognize as anger. They hide so deeply in your identity that you mistake them for just the way you are. Let's look at 3 of these hidden faces. Perfectionism as control. On the surface, perfectionism looks like ambition, high standards, or discipline. But underneath, it often hides anger. Anger at the chaos of life. Anger at feeling powerless in the past. Anger at not being allowed to make mistakes. So you tighten your grip. You polish every detail. You push yourself beyond exhaustion. It looks like control, but really, it's anger frozen into rigid rules. The cost? Anxiety, burnout, and never feeling good enough. Ask yourself, when I demand perfection, what anger am I holding at myself, at others, at the world? And what would it feel like to allow imperfection without punishment? Drawn to conflict. Another hidden form is an unconscious pull toward drama. You don't want fights, but somehow you always end up in them. You choose partners who provoke you. You work in places full of tension. You join debates that spin out of control. This isn't random. It's your shadow creating arenas where your repressed anger can finally find release. If you've silenced yourself too long, your psyche may go looking for battles just to feel alive. The next time you notice yourself pulled into conflict, pause. Ask, is this really about them? Or is my shadow using this situation as an outlet? Seeing the pattern gives you a choice to step out of drama and find healthier ways to channel your fire. Emotional numbness. Perhaps the most hidden form of all is numbness. You don't feel rage. You don't feel irritation. You don't feel much at all. On the surface, you seem calm, even unbothered. But numbness is not peace, it's anger turned to ice. This happens when expressing anger felt unsafe for too long. To protect yourself, your psyche shut down not only anger, but all strong emotions. Life becomes flat. The highs and lows disappear. The fire is gone not because it burned out, but because it was smothered. The way through is gentle curiosity. Instead of forcing yourself to feel, ask, when did I first learn anger wasn't safe? What am I still protecting myself from? Slowly, as you create safety, the ice begins to melt. Buried emotions thaw, returning with wisdom. Perfectionism, conflict seeking, numbness. These are anger's deepest disguises. They're not loud, but they are powerful, shaping how you live, love, and relate to yourself. And once you recognize them, you realize anger has never been your enemy. It's been your teacher, all along waiting for you to finally listen. Noticing the signs of shadow anger is the first step. But real change begins when you sit with anger, listen to it, and let it speak. Anger doesn't need to be tamed or glorified. It needs space. Simple practices can turn it from chaos into clarity. The anger timeline. Take a blank page and draw a line down the middle. On one side, write your earliest memories of being angry. What happened? How did the adults respond? Were you told to calm down, punished, or ignored? On the other side, write how you wanted to respond but couldn't. When you look back, you'll start to see patterns. Maybe your anger was dismissed, so you learned to hide it. Maybe it was explosive, so you feared it even in yourself. Your relationship with anger didn't start yesterday. It has roots. And by seeing them, you begin to loosen their grip. A conversation with anger. Anger isn't a monster. It's a messenger. Try this. Write a letter to your anger. Start with, "Dear anger, why are you here? What do you want me to know?" Then let your hand respond, as if anger itself is speaking. "I'm here because you keep letting people cross your boundaries. I'm here because you've forgotten your worth." It may feel odd at first, but don't be surprised if the answers are sharper and clearer than you expected. Anger often holds the truths we've ignored for too long. Body awareness. Before anger ever reaches your words, it shows up in your body. A tight chest, a knot in your stomach, a clench in your fists. The next time it rises, pause and scan yourself. Where do you feel the heat? Where's the tension? Place a hand there. Breathe into it. Instead of judging it, say silently, "I see you. I hear you. What are you trying to show me?" That simple acknowledgement can turn raw fire into a clear message. The boundary letter. Think of a situation where you've stayed silent, where your anger has simmered. Write a letter you'll never send. Pour it all out: what happened, how you felt, what you wish you could say. Don't censor yourself. When you read it back, notice what's underneath the fire. Often, it's not rage, it's grief, it's longing, it's the deep need to be respected. The letter gives your truth a safe voice, and once it's spoken privately, you can choose how to express it calmly in real life, turning anger into action. Finally, ask, what action does my anger want me to take? Sometimes it's small, like saying no to one extra task. Sometimes it's big, like leaving a toxic relationship or making a bold change. Write down 3 possibilities: one small, one medium, one bold. Then commit to one this week. Action is how anger becomes transformation. These practices are not about silencing anger or unleashing it recklessly. They're about listening. Once you do, journaling and reflection stop feeling like chores. They become a dialogue with your hidden self, the part of you that's been waiting for your attention. And when you finally give that part a voice, something inside shifts. You feel lighter, clearer, more aligned. Anger stops being a heavy burden. It becomes a compass pointing you back to your truth. Nowhere does anger hide more cleverly than in love. Relationships are mirrors. They reflect our joy, tenderness, and affection, but also the wounds and shadows we'd rather not face. And when anger goes unexamined, it doesn't disappear. It slips into the bond, often disguised, quietly shaping the way we love. When anger masks hurt. In love, anger often isn't fire on the surface. It shows up as distance, coldness, or sharp words. Think of a time when your partner let you down. Maybe they dismissed your feelings. Maybe they forgot something important. Anger flared, but beneath it was something softer: hurt, fear, or longing. The shadow resists vulnerability, so instead of showing the wound, it covers it with fire. If you only see the flames, you miss the deeper message. Most often, anger in love is saying, "I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to feel valued. I wanted to feel safe." When anger turns into resentment, if that anger is never voiced, it doesn't fade. It hardens into resentment. One unspoken complaint turns into 10, then 100. Before long, even the smallest action, a tone of voice, a forgotten chore, feels unbearable. Couples often argue about surface issues, but underneath is the same wound: anger that has been ignored. The way through isn't endless fighting, it's honest expression. Saying calmly, "When this happens, I feel angry because it crosses my boundary," feels uncomfortable, but it prevents years of quiet poison projecting onto your partner. Relationships magnify projection. What you repress in yourself, you often accuse your partner of. If you've silenced your own assertiveness, you might call them controlling. If you've buried your own passion, their intensity may irritate you. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." In love, this is doubly true. Your partner's actions may be imperfect, but your reaction often reveals a piece of your own shadow knocking on the door. Anger as a teacher in intimacy. Here's the paradox. Relationships are meant to trigger anger, not because love is broken, but because intimacy brings the shadow to the surface. The closer someone gets, the more likely they'll touch the places you've hidden. That doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. It means the relationship is alive. Every conflict can be a classroom. Every fight can be a lesson if you're willing to ask, what is this anger teaching me about myself? What value, wound, or boundary is being revealed here? When you own your anger instead of throwing it like a weapon, you stop fighting each other and start fighting for understanding. A gentle practice for couples. Once a week, sit with your partner and complete this sentence. One thing that made me angry this week was, then add, because it made me feel. It's a simple shift, but powerful. You're not blaming, you're revealing yourself. You're giving anger a voice before it festers into resentment. And you're inviting your partner to listen not just to your words, but to your truth. Love isn't about never feeling angry. It's about learning how to let anger guide you toward honesty, depth, and intimacy. When conflict arises, you have a choice. You can fight each other, or you can use the fire to see more clearly. Handled this way, anger doesn't destroy relationships. It strengthens them. It becomes the teacher that shows you how to love more consciously, more courageously, and more truthfully. Anger doesn't just appear at home. It spills into workplaces, friendships, and social circles. In fact, many people carry more unspoken anger in professional and social settings than anywhere else precisely because they feel they have to hide it. But the shadow doesn't stay hidden forever. The silent burn at work. Think about the modern workplace. Endless emails, impossible deadlines, unfair treatment, a lack of recognition. It's the perfect breeding ground for shadow anger. Maybe you felt it staying late while others leave early, being overlooked while someone else gets the credit, watching your boundaries crumble under just one more task. At first, you keep quiet. You don't want to lose your job. But the silence builds resentment. You snap at coworkers. You lose motivation. You fantasize about quitting in a dramatic explosion. This isn't weakness. It's your shadow saying, something here is unsustainable. You're betraying yourself by staying silent. The healthier path is to treat anger as feedback. It's not just frustration, it's information. It's pointing to where your worth isn't being honored, where your boundaries need reinforcement, where your voice needs to be heard. The social mask. Anger hides behind politeness too. With friends, you nod, you laugh, you play along even when someone's comment stings. But later, you replay the moment over and over, thinking of everything you wish you'd said. That silence doesn't mean the anger disappeared. It lingers. It colors how you see that person, how you show up the next time. The shadow thrives in the gap between what you feel and what you allow yourself to express. The next time you hear yourself saying, "It's fine," while your body tightens, pause. Ask, what truth am I hiding to keep the peace? And is that silence worth the cost of my authenticity? Anger in the collective. Step outside personal life, and you'll see anger everywhere in politics, in communities, online. Scroll through social media, and you'll find outrage in every corner. But much of it isn't really about the issues at hand. It's shadow anger, personal frustration projected onto the collective stage. Jung warned us about this. When individuals avoid their inner work, their unprocessed anger leaks into society, fueling division and hostility. The collective shadow grows heavier when personal shadows are ignored, transforming anger in public spaces. So, how do we handle it? Not by pretending anger isn't there, not by pouring it recklessly into every argument. The middle way is awareness. When you feel yourself triggered at work or online, pause. Take a breath. Ask, what is this really touching in me? Is this about them or about something I haven't faced in myself? This doesn't mean ignoring injustice. Quite the opposite. Anger is one of the strongest forces for change. But to use it wisely, we first need to own it. Otherwise, we just add more fire to the chaos. A simple step. Next time anger rises in a workplace or social setting, jot down 3 things. What happened? What did I feel? What value or boundary is this pointing to? You'll start to see patterns. Maybe it's about fairness. Maybe it's about respect. Maybe it's about integrity. Once you see the root, you can respond from clarity instead of shadow. Anger in work and social life isn't just a nuisance. It's a compass. It shows you where your boundaries are too thin, where your values are being ignored, where you need to stand taller in your truth. If you learn to read it, anger stops being an obstacle. It becomes an ally. Many people turn to spirituality hoping to rise above pain, conflict, and anger. They want peace, light, serenity. And while that longing is natural, there's a hidden trap. If you use spirituality to escape your emotions, you're not healing, you're bypassing. Jung called this a form of spiritual inflation, using light to cover the dark instead of integrating it, the illusion of only positive vibes. You've probably heard phrases like, "Don't lower your vibration," or "Stay positive and anger will fade." At first it sounds wise, but emotions don't vanish just because you ignore them. They sink deeper into the unconscious. And anger, buried in the name of positivity, comes back stronger and more destructive when it finally erupts. Real spirituality doesn't erase anger, it transforms it. Light without shadow is incomplete. Wholeness comes only when both are embraced. The mask of detachment. Another bypass is detachment. People say, "I'm above this, I don't get angry anymore." But often what they've done is cut themselves off. They numb not only anger, but passion, desire, authenticity. On the surface, it looks like calm, but underneath, the shadow burns hotter. That's not enlightenment, that's avoidance. And life eventually brings challenges strong enough to shatter the mask, forcing the shadow back into view. When spiritual communities hide anger, ironically, places meant for healing can become breeding grounds for shadow anger. People suppress frustration to appear enlightened, but it leaks out as gossip, quiet competition, or judgment. The more a group chases purity, the more it risks splitting off the parts that don't fit the image. Jung reminded us. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow it casts. When communities deny anger, it doesn't vanish. It lurks beneath the smiles. The transformative path. So how do we avoid these traps? Integration. Instead of running from anger, sit with it. Ask, what is this emotion here to teach me? How can I bring this energy into my spiritual growth, instead of pretending it isn't there? Meditation isn't about silencing anger, it's about witnessing it without judgment. Prayer isn't about asking for anger to vanish, it's about asking for clarity about what it reveals. Rituals aren't about purging emotions, they're about honoring every part of you as sacred, even the fire. A gentle practice. Next time you meditate, instead of pushing anger away, invite it in. Picture it sitting beside you. Ask, what message do you bring? What truth am I avoiding? Then breathe with it. Notice how its energy shifts when you stop resisting and start listening. This is true spirituality, not bypassing anger, but integrating it into your wholeness. Because your shadow isn't against you. It's for you, calling you back to balance. Anger is not unspiritual. It may be one of the most spiritual forces you carry. It burns away illusion. It demands honesty. It points you toward truth. When you integrate anger, you don't just become calmer, you become whole. Jung never saw anger as a random burst of emotion. To him, every feeling was a doorway into something greater. The unconscious, the archetypes, and the collective psyche we all share. To understand anger fully, we have to see it not only in ourselves, but in the world around us. The personal and the collective. Each of us carries a personal shadow, the traits and emotions we reject or repress. But Jung taught that humanity itself carries a collective shadow. This is what whole cultures deny, silence, or project. History shows it clearly. Societies that suppress anger in the name of obedience often erupt in revolutions. Cultures that glorify strength while rejecting vulnerability fall into cycles of violence. What we bury collectively always returns with force, just as it does within an individual. So when you feel anger, it's not only your story, you're also touching something larger. Generations of silenced voices, unresolved injustices, wounds passed down through time. Anger as alchemical fire. For Jung, emotions weren't good or bad, they were symbolic. Anger is the fire of transformation. In alchemy, fire was essential. It burned away impurities, melted rigid forms, and allowed new shapes to emerge. So when anger rises, the question isn't, how do I stop this? But what needs to be transformed in me? What structure must break so something new can grow? Anger isn't a problem, it's a process. It's the psyche's way of urging growth. Projection on a larger scale. Just as individuals project anger onto others, nations and groups do the same. Whole societies project their shadow onto an enemy, blaming them for what they refuse to face in themselves. Wars, prejudice, and cultural divides are fueled by this collective projection. This is why Jung warned of the dangers of the collective shadow. When we don't face anger within, it feeds the larger systems of hostility outside. Every person who refuses their inner work adds fuel to the fire of conflict. The call to wholeness. Jung's vision wasn't about perfection. It was about wholeness. To be whole is to embrace both light and dark, both love and anger, both calm and fire. To hold anger consciously is to hold power. To deny it is to give that power away to the shadow. And when enough individuals reclaim their fire, the collective shadow begins to soften. A practice for collective awareness. Next time anger stirs in you, pause and ask 2 questions. What is this anger revealing in me? What does it reveal about the collective shadow I'm part of? Maybe your workplace anger reflects not only your personal boundary, but also a culture of exploitation. Maybe relationship anger reflects not only your needs, but also the collective struggle between genders to find balance. When you see both layers, your anger becomes more than personal. It becomes archetypal part of the larger human journey toward integration. Anger is both your fire and humanity's fire. It is deeply personal and yet universally shared. Jung's deeper philosophy reminds us, until we face our shadows individually and collectively, we remain trapped in cycles of projection and conflict. But when we dare to listen, anger becomes more than an emotion. It becomes alchemy, carrying us all closer to wholeness. We began with a question. What if anger is not your enemy, but your teacher? Along the way, we've seen its many faces, the outbursts and silences, the resentment and projections, the perfectionism, the numbness, the quiet pull toward conflict. We've seen how it shows up in love, in work, in spiritual life, and even in the collective struggles of humanity. And through it all, one truth shines. Anger, when ignored, controls us. But anger, when acknowledged, transforms us. The fire that creates. Think back to the image of the volcano. Buried fire destroys, but fire brought to the surface makes new soil fertile. In the same way, anger can poison when it's suppressed, or burn when it's reckless. But when held with awareness, it becomes fuel for clarity, for courage, for transformation. Jung understood this deeply. Wholeness doesn't come from cutting away the parts of ourselves we dislike. It comes from embracing them, integrating them, letting them complete us. Your shadow, including your anger, isn't here to ruin you, it's here to make you whole. A question for you. So ask yourself, what is my anger trying to teach me right now? Not the anger from years ago, not the anger that might come tomorrow, the anger alive in you today. What boundary is it pointing to? What value is it protecting? What truth is it urging you to speak? Take a journal. Sit in silence. Let your anger write to you. And instead of fearing it, thank it. Because that fire is not a curse. It's the same fire that lights your path back to your authentic self. Walking with your shadow. The world doesn't need more people who deny their emotions. It needs people who can walk with their shadow. People who can hold their anger with wisdom. People who can turn that energy into creation rather than destruction. When you learn to do this, your anger stops being a dark weight. It becomes a guide, a teacher, a companion leading you back to yourself. Closing words. So stay curious, stay brave, and the next time anger rises, don't ask, how do I get rid of this? Ask, what gift is hidden here? Because anger is not the end of peace. It is the beginning of truth. And when you walk with your truth, you walk toward wholeness,